While you weren't looking, President Obama gave the government a new power. Just this past Friday, he quietly implemented an executive order that reprioritizes communications through a special White House chosen committee in case of a national emergency. So, say a war breaks out or a hurricane blasts the Gulf Coast. In those cases, President Obama says, and I'm going to quote him, the federal government must have the ability to communicate at all times and under all circumstances to carry out its most critical and time-sensitive missions. Amy Stepanovich is the Associate Litigation Counsel for the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Amy, welcome to you. I guess the first question out of the gate is, does this really give the president ultimate authority here over phones, emails, et cetera?
Well, it actually does give him a lot more authority than we think he had before. Congress has been considering cybersecurity bills for a long time now. They've been in committee for over a year, and the president has stepped in, however, and kind of given himself and the Department of Homeland Security increased authority to kind of prioritize federal communications to the detriment of civilian communications. So, for example, my cell phone conversation or your cell phone conversation can be shut down in favor of a conversation between official at the Department of Homeland Security and somebody in the state government.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask specifically. So, say we were having a conversation over our cell phones or emails, that could be shut down. And in a sense, look, I mean, this happened, this executive order came after the president was just in Colorado because of those horrible, horrible wildfires. So obviously we need a way to protect communications in crises like that, do we not?
We do, and it's a noble mission. In fact, generally we have agreed with the executive's approach to cybersecurity. He has a very positive way of dealing with things. For example, he has promoted the idea of having cybersecurity operations housed at a civilian federal agency, such as DHS, which has built-in transparency and accountability measures, as opposed to some approaches which have housed it at a government military agency, such as the National Security Agency, where we would have no idea what was going on. The executive has been very, very pro-civil liberties in that perspective. However, this is really something that should be left to Congress to deal with and not to an executive order.
Let's just remind everyone what his first executive order was. This was 2009, and here was the president.
In order to effect the appropriate disposition of individuals currently detained by the Department of Defense at Guantanamo, and promptly to close the detention facility at Guantanamo consistent with the national security and foreign policy interests of the United States and the interests of justice, I hereby order.
So this is a president who, started out wanting to close Gitmo, which, as we know, that didn't happen. And now he's, taking authority over our cell communications, emails, etc. Question to you is, what happened to him?
Well, I'm not really sure if we can question something the president has done, especially in relation to what you had just prescribed, because in relation to Gitmo, he had acted to close it down, and then Congress came back and said you actually can't. They prohibited funding from being used to take prisoners out of Gitmo, which is something that I think people overlook. But Congress is who we've elected to make the laws. It's in our Constitution. That's the branch of authority that we rely on to make laws, and I think we still have to rely on that separation of powers principle as kind of inherent to our federal system.
But it's interesting to point out, too, liberals, they loved to accuse former President George W. Bush of destroying our personal liberties, but whose privacy policies do you find more worrisome now? President Bush, President Obama? Where do you stand?
President Obama definitely has a different take on privacy and on transparency. On his first day in office, he issued a memo saying that transparency would kind of trump his overall administration. He really wanted documents to be out in the public. However, as an agency, as an organization, EPIC has constantly come up against obstacles and hurdles to getting those documents and to assimilating them to the public. So I think there's definitely a difference between what the Obama administration has said that they were going to do and what has happened in practice.
So upholding the promise of transparency, are you happy with what he's done or no?
We believe he's taken steps. We aren't happy with where we are right now. I think we really should be a lot further along.